Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Is my audio okay?
I can hear you fine.
Great. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 adopted by the Mass General Assembly and approved by the Governor, the city is authorized to use remote participation at meetings of the Cambridge Citizens for public comment. In order to watch the meeting, please tune in to Channel 22 or visit the open meeting portal on the city's website. If you would like to provide public comment, please, we will not allow any additional public comment to sign up after 2:30 p.m. Mr. Clerk, if you would take a roll of the members present.
Absent. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Present and audible.
Present. Councilor Zondervan.
Present and audible.
There are 3 members present.
Welcome everyone to this hearing on our water supply. And in a moment, we'll hear from the water issues with the chlorides in our water supply and from an expert at Northeastern University on PFAS. A little bit of a personal presentation because I've experienced a lot of issues with our water supply, particularly the show you. So I don't know how well you can see this on the Zoom, but these are 2 of the heating elements for my electric water heater. These fail about every 2 years. You can see the accumulation here of rust and other particles in the bag that I put them in. Into that, the valves on the water heater itself failed a couple of years ago and had to be replaced. And I don't know if you can see how thicky. And then last but not least, this is from my shower, which also had to be replaced, the valves, and you can see again the accumulation of liquids. When we ask why not switch to MWRA water, which doesn't have this level of corrosiveness, we are told it's cheaper and publicly. So we had an appropriation 2.5 years ago for $3 million to choose, and at that meeting, we were also told that there had been previously repairs done because of the water issue. In addition to those costs, we're also spending millions of dollars to acquire land around our water supply in order to protect our water supply. And then, as you'll hear from a business owner later on in the meeting, and then last but not least, we heard quite recently that we have PFAS in our water, and we're from a reservoir that supplies MWRA communities is quite stark because that reservoir, as far as I am able to determine, is of lower quality compared to what we could be using, and the justification for that is that, well, it's cheaper, but the presentation from the water department. So I will turn it over to the city manager and Sam Cornell. Okay, thank you.
And if we want to lead with the presentation, Sam, I think that's the way to start. So again, sorry for the confusion. Sam?
Sure, I think, did you want to hear?
The water department wanted us to make the presentation. Do you need?
You know, I can load it up, then I can do it as long as I'm put into a
We see your screen.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me put it on slideshow.
You could, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so is that, you got the first, oh, there it is. Okay, perfect. Does everybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
You see how I, Okay, I'm here to present the typical water quality issues that we've seemed to come across, talk about those, talk about the water system costs, and then talk about the future. Square mile watershed that are in the lighter and darker blues to the left, the Hobbs Brook and the Stony Brook reservoir watersheds. There's a 7-mile distributor through our 200-mile distribution system within the city of Cambridge. One interesting point to note is the 24-mile watershed. We monitor the towns. We work with Mass DOT to deal with runoff, stormwater runoff, and so on and so forth. And so there is this effect. Again, the Cambridge mission statement is to provide a safe, uninterrupted water supply. Cambridge water system quality exceeds all Mass DEP and US EPA regulations. One of the benefits is that we perform, hundreds of those as requested along the way. Another benefit of having a state certified laboratory is that we can do a rapid lab. We're able to participate in the EPA's unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, the UCMR. And one of the benefits there is that what that is, contaminants, typically there's 25 compounds per round. There can be more, there can be less, depending on the current year. It's about a 5-year cycle, give or take, and we've participated. We're working to figure out what those compounds would be. And again, that gives us a benefit of hopefully detecting if there are any in our system early and then working a resolution to that. Million gallon per day basis. And you can see that since I guess 66, we're tracking these, and since 1970, we've actually been on a downward, a little under 12 million gallons a day. So that's so we do pay attention to that, and it's been a lot of reasons why that happens. Actually did the work in 2014. That's when the projections started, and you can see the end of that graph from my last graph, and which is 16.16 million gallons a day, which was established in 1987. And so that's a good thing. The reality of it is, since 2014, when we started that, at the beginning was the drought and the fact that we did a lot of advertising about the drought, or public relations about the fact that we're in a drought. It was the drought. One of the things I need to mention also is that we are initiating another demand study that hopefully will be done in about a year. We'd like to see from 19, it was like 12.5 million or 12.6 million gallons a day, to 2020, which is a little under 12 million gallons a day. So in water consumption, but again, the whole idea of doing the demand study, we'll see, whether this curve is correct or it should be some other curve based on that. So that should be done in about a year. Water department is an enterprise fund. What that means is our water rates pay for all of our operations, capital expenditures, and debt services. We'll know what the balance is from last fiscal year, probably in September, October, when we formally have that verified. A year ago, many occasions for a variety of different things. We've used it for construction purposes on Huron Avenue when we're replacing our force main. We've also used it in the fertilizer system, but we also have the array, which gives us a certain level of redundancy that I think is probably extremely unique in Eastern Massachusetts, at least. Topics these days. It's a water repellent, and it's used in many everyday products. It's used, these are all examples of where it's used. It's used in carpets, it's used in shirt. Regulation is defined as 6 PFAS compounds, and they're called PFAS 6 as an acronym for the 6 compounds, and those 6 compounds are listed here. But these are the 6 compounds that are being monitored based on the new regulation that's been promulgated in January of this year. Non-detect, but shortly after the UCMR 4 was completed, they were able to increase the ability to detect PFAS compounds. So once that, and then obviously at that time we did detect PFAS in our water. And so we did that from August 20, promulgate regulations recently for. We found those levels during that time. Was 1.8, I think, parts per trillion for the combination of the 6 PFAS compounds. And then subsequently thereon, over the course, those first 2 samples, which ended up being 19.9. And so we never exceeded the 20 part per trillion guideline from the state. Likelihood we could remove at least 50% of the PFAS compounds using that media. DEP required us to initiate and perform bench scale tests to determine, the whole idea was to determine specifically in our water what the removal efficiency was. So we've got that done, and we from the meaning that there was no PFAS, that specific compound we were testing for was not in the water. And then the other thing we wanted to determine with the pilot testing was to replace a different mechanism, and we would expect that we would expend the carbon surface area at some point. Our guesstimate at the beginning was about 3 years, but we will have that exact number close. And end up being that the filter media the GAC carbon filter media that worked the best was the exact filter media that we have now, which makes it really easy. In the sense, we'll submit that to DEP once they approve that media to be used, the granular activated carbon media to be used. We will then put it out to bid and go to PFAS compounds over for January, February through June. These are the exact results of the PFAS 6 requirement. Again, as I said, the rest of the media will be to continuously maintain the PFAS 6 to be below 10 parts per trillion, which is considered pretty much no risk by Mass DEP. And then the plan at this point is to replace all of our media by the end of this calendar year. And we'll put everything into action. We're just going to go back a slide. I just want to show this little graphic here. The media is this gray material in the granular activated carbon. We'll replace it, and then we'll monitor our PFAS compounds so that we'll have an estimate as to what the replacement will be. Next, a pretty important topic, obviously, besides PFAS, is lead. We do not have any lead in our raw water. We did initiate a program 0.5 and use chloramines as a secondary disinfectant. We're using ozone as a primary. Well, at that time we were using chlorine as a primary disinfectant. Our results for 2020 at the 90th percentile content, meaning in the top 10%, at the bottom of the requirement has been and continues to be 60 samples tested per year, and those samples need to be taken from houses with lead, billion limit for action, and it's worked very well. Based on the level of lead in the water, I think you need to do a 1-year cycle. If it's below 10 parts per trillion, then you do a 3-year cycle. So we've done extremely well with that. Another benefit of having our own lab, and also in 2019, we assisted the school department in testing every single elementary school tap that they had, and we gave them the results, and that helped them to, in the raw water, typically where lead will be found is could be in the service line, it could be in the house plumbing, and the most prominent place we've found in the past is that it's 6% of the samples. If we found someone that was above the actual level, we did sampling, whether it was on their own or not, we would typically ask them to replace the faucet, and like I said, 90% of the time. And then continuing to talk about lead is this picture is, there's a copper service area, what portion of that. In Cambridge, the water service is the responsibility of the homeowners, and it's been that way since the inception of the water lines that we had in the system. We currently have 2147 lead service lines. We do have, for a couple of years now, we've had an online database where people can look and see the lead services in the system. In calendar year 2000, the water department initiated that we purchased only no lead water, no lead materials, and that what that is defined as is less than 0.25% lead by weight, by content, by weight. General discussion. I guess I was just asked this, can everyone hear me okay? Is that working okay for everybody? Yeah. Methanes in the old days used to be of a major concern. And with ozone as a primary disinfectant that we use, haloacetic acids can become a problem. As you can see, 60, and we're half or less of those as well in our water. Another area of concern that we've heard about, I'm sure in the media past, are in finished water. We do it twice a year in the warmer waters to see if there's any difference between the warmer water and the colder water. And in general, we have found some cellulose or a Splenda, which is a sugar product. And some of these are easily destroyed with ozone as our primary disinfectant. And we're obviously another area that's been talked about over the years is chlorides. The level in 2020 that's in the water quality report that was sent out in June was 170 parts per million. In 19, it was higher at 196. You know, how tough a winter it was, because we have found in a study that was done in 1984 by Mass DOT that 70% of our of the resampling over the last 2 years, and it's ongoing, is to see if indeed that's the same, or is it less, or is it more. And then the ultimate goal of that work would be to, MCL is 250 parts per million, and we have never exceeded that level. Obviously in 2018 we were close. I think that's a direct result from the drought of 15, 16, and 17, and businesses to better control their de-icing practices. We do that a lot right now with our watershed division. Magnesium, total dissolved solids has varied. As you can see here, it's currently in 2020 is 390 parts per million. It was 460 regulatory limit. There's been a lot of discussion about hot water systems and what the effect of hardness or solids or chlorides have on hardness versus a variety of other hardnesses in the state and or in the country. Ours is 68 as we have here. The MWRA's is lower. The WU of hardness as we do. And the reason I'm bringing that up is it's really all about design around that water quality. You know, we've had circumstances that we've worked with the Cambridge Housing Authority on one of their new facilities, 10 years ago, corrosion resistant materials. And they, they have had zero problems since they upgraded their materials to meet the proper water. That people or their plumbers talking about, you replace your water heater in 3 years. And, it's all about it's the Cambridge water. They have water heaters that you put sacrificial anodes in them to take care of it. There's other methodologies. There's maintenance that needs to go on in your hot water heaters and hot water systems on a regular basis. And they work extremely well, and so on. So I think it's a matter of designing a hot water system, because increasing the temperature of water, and dissolved solids can all, precipitate out and create issues and so on and so forth. So that's why the hot water heaters need to be drained. If that is that type of hot water heater, regular solvable problem based on design. Again, in the past, there's been, using their indoor water was $4,320 per million gallons, which is 2.6 times the cost it does to take for us to produce the water. And the cost out of that 18.3 is $7.5 million, or $1,620 per million gallons to us to produce it. To reduce out our operating expenses relating to treatment, which is energy, chemicals, maintenance, and staff. The total cost of our water budget would go up from 18 increase in water rates to customers. So again, just breaking that down a little more, this is what would the unit of water is 100 cubic feet. And the increase would be 269, to give you an example. And this is just straight 88.1% increase from a comparison early in this calendar year. The recommendation, my recommendation is to maintain our resiliency of our water system. That includes reducing energy use. And again, in the last 10 years, we've reduced our energy consumption from renewable energy sources. Right now, we have solar panels on the roof. I'm sure we can expand those to different other areas. And the next thing on the horizon is to continue to finalize water conservation, because that will help us a lot. And one of the benefits of our system, as I've said already, is the MWRA as a redundant water supply. It gives us, and that's happened about 10 years ago. We were able to still supply water to the city of Cambridge without disruption, as they had when their Holtman Aqueduct had a major failure in 10 or 20. And we have been since Route 128 was built, working with Mass DOT. We work with the towns, we work with businesses to reduce, de-icing materials. So redevelopment is, in a sense, has been our friend over the last 25 years. We've been able to work with all these businesses and do that. We've also acquired quite a bit of land over the last 12 years, working on our watershed facilities, which we do on a regular basis, which includes dam maintenance, as well as our gatehouses, treatment process maintenance and improvement. And today, you'd think it was just built. The city is gracious enough to give us a good budget, and we're able to maintain and do all the things we need to do, and process sampling and a variety of different testing for residents of Cambridge. We need to maintain, as we have, and improve our fun reservation, hide and relax and go away to peruse the water, to be in quiet at Black Snook and watch the habitat. We transition system maintenance. And the main ability is through water main rehabilitation. We also obviously do service replacements and all kinds of water to residents in Cambridge. And we should continue, as we have, since we are a full member of the MWRA, we should continue to be a full member of the MWRA. And I guess that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Councilor Zondervan and or City Manager De Pasquale.
Thank you. Yes, I'll see if my colleagues have any clarifying questions. Mr. Carlo.
We can't hear you.
That's probably two questions. I thought the presentation was extremely thorough. What jurisdiction overseeing development, I take it? That's how we preserve the quality. Could you describe?
What we do is the main avenue is through conservation commissions in each of the towns in the watershed. So we have a very good relationship with all of them. We do pull in, we participate in the hearings, we participate in making comments, and we make them, and they're strongly ensure that everything meets the regulations, for like stormwater control. And again, a lot of times, a lot of these companies that are building or rebuilding these facilities, well, we work with, for example, besides a community, we've worked with Mass DOT. In the last 10 years, they put a significant amount of detention basins in our Waltham, all the towns that we're working in, that we have a watershed in, I should say, they've done that. So we not only work with the communities, we work with Mass DOT and so on, and that seems to work extremely well.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Corder, does that include the ALY quad?
We have our watershed group work strictly in our watershed, although we have worked with DPW to make sure that all of our areas in the reservation are meeting the codes that the city.
Again, be it the Alewife Quadrangle or indeed the Huron Avenue, Concord Avenue area, while they're part of the pond, is held at a higher level to make sure that groundwater flows away from the pond rather than toward the pond. Again, just to make sure that we're properly protecting it.
Is compared to standards, national standards, I assume, or state standards that you have to follow. So MW.
Totally different types of systems. Our watershed is in an urban environment. The MWRA is in a rural, extremely rural environment. And I would have to say in general, they're all.
Okay, thank you. Very good presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. Goes into maintaining our water supply. Just to respond briefly to my colleague's question, again, because as Mr. Corda said, that water is basically sitting in a forest, whereas our water supply is. McDougall now, who's a business owner in Cambridge, and has had some ongoing issues with the corrosion in the water supply.
Yes.
Yes, you sound and look great.
Okay, well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Councillor Zondervan, for reaching out to me. My name is Aaron McDougall, November 2017. I'm also a Cambridge homeowner. I own 5 Wright Street in Cambridge. So, owners certainly involved in food and beverages, but probably beyond that, as well as perhaps lend a couple of thoughts as a Cambridge homeowner. And I city like Cambridge with high quality water at an affordable price. So, when it comes to things like the relative cost differentials of Cambridge water versus, I was aware of the Cambridge water issues prior to signing my lease at 100 Kirkland Street, and I had my water independently did in the previous presentation. Water composition changes on year-to-year basis when the water was sampled. So 150 parts per million, and my chloride level at 230 milligrams per liter parts per million. Both are perspective, so they were inbounds, but somewhat problematic. And as a business owner, I would say that the chlorides under heat and pressure combine with hydrogen or residual sulfur compounds in the water, and you end up with premature corrosion of water tanks. The secondary issue, which I can talk about a little bit later as well, is its impact on beverage quality, which I know is something that tends to get poo-pooed. But given that it's my livelihood, it is important to me. According to the latest the annual water quality study is at about 390 parts per million TDS. The chlorides are 30. And I'm not sure to what extent that had to do with water at the source or sort of that last mile of piping, which contributed to the higher levels at my school location. 174 is still an extremely high level. I mean, if you compare it to MWRA produces monthly reports, and we use, in a coffee shop, of course, an espresso machine is a pretty critical piece of equipment. Espresso machines are expensive, a piece of equipment too. An espresso machine will cost manufacturer, used widely throughout Cambridge and the rest of the country. Their water specifications, when you purchase one of these machines, they less. TDS again is, there is a guideline there in the 75 to 150 parts per million range, but it's the chlorides that are problematic along with the machine. They will not warranty their equipment unless you go on an RO system. Standard filtration, your carbon sediment really is through a reverse osmosis system. So you're either forced to purchase an RO system to maintain your, generally should last about 7 years plus. I know multiple Cambridge cafe owners who have had to have serious work in the equipment repair community, certainly within the espresso machine manufacturing community. Whenever you talk to a new vendor, the first thing they ask, if the RO systems do work, they are expensive. I mean, my system cost $5,000 for my shop. Needed to wait 3 or 4 years. There are filters that need to be changed annually. That's about $1,000. Maintenance on the machines pumps break and the like. One thing that I really hate about using an RO system is that they are highly efficient. What they do is brine. And that ratio is generally, depending on your manufacturer, 1 gallon of clear water to 4 or 5 gallons of brine. So that's why we're wasting resources like this. So it's something that I certainly would prefer not to have to deal with, which invariably happens at the worst time possible. Or you invest in an RO system and maintain the RO system, and that's a cost of doing business as chlorides through reverse osmosis treatment. So it's costly, but the alternative is equipment. And again, well, I have 2 water filtration systems. I have a 3M sediment and carbon filter, which reads through the water main, goes through my 3M system, and then it's fed into my water boiler. And when I open my shop, so in May of 2000, I needed to have that replaced in February of this year. So it lasted less than 4 years, three and a half to 4 years on that, which of course is beyond the commercial equipment is expensive. That for me was a $6,500 repair if you include these are real cost to the business. So I want to be very clear, there are explicit costs involved in primary inputs to your product. So that is, that's definitely a cost. And for me, when I look at the cost of if I also factor in the water, which is the extra water, which is consumed and wasted in producing RO water, TDS, a very bland product, and you need to remineralize the water as well to palatable levels. So Cambridge water. The taste is something that, again, it's easy to poo-poo, but as a solvent is less efficient. You do not extract properly the desirable components of coffee. Moved to Cambridge, are surprised by the taste of Cambridge water. I mean, I moved from Brookline to Cambridge, and it was immediately obvious to me. Tasting, it does not taste good. So at my home, I installed a reverse osmosis, a home under sink, plumbed in. Again, it isn't really relevant, but I would argue that it is certainly rare, are important aspects to a high quality of life that we would hope that everyone here in Cambridge can achieve, and the infrastructure is capable of guarantee. So I think that's a very common experience amongst Cambridge homeowners as well, that water heaters tend to basically start to higher. You need to pay for the labor necessary to install that new water heater, and sometimes it's hard to procure the time of a contracted because of the water, So I guess I would leave it there. I do understand there are costs, there are big picture in coping with the water quality we have here in Cambridge, and the MWRA system. I will say the water is on 132, and as I mentioned, the chloride level is between 836. It's actually fairly magnificent water.
And Aaron, if you're available during discussion to answer some questions, that would be great as well.
Sure.
Yeah, Dr. Brown, are you available to speak? There you are. So Dr. Brown will talk a little bit more about the PFAS issue.
Supply issues. I have a number of colleagues on my team, and actually pretty much all of us are spending today from 1 to 5 at the National Academy of PFAS. So I was hoping to get one of my more water expert colleagues to come join, but as I say, we're pretty much all there, and I've just taken this slight break from it. And here is below the MCLs. I think we're probably all very happy about that. And in fact, if you look at the individual PFAS, so it's good that we're testing. Massachusetts, as you know, is a leader here. We're one of the few states to have many MCLs, and a lot of places a little and they can fluctuate. So what that means by that fluctuation is that the standard, we might not meet the standards in the future. Of 10 nanograms per liter, which is far below the 20 that the state is requiring. So I think having goals like that is good, which is the same as part per trillion, would be ideal in terms of being health protective. So we do need to go lower and lower all the time. Say that you should in the future ask her to give you information. Silent Spring has been doing PFAS work in Cambridge, in Massachusetts water systems that I was asked to address. Where is this coming from, and why do we see it here but not in the MWRA water? There are many, many sources based. If we're right next to an airport, we have a pretty good hunch that we're getting it from either the industrial use or from the fire, any agricultural areas that are treated with sludge used as fertilizer, because that sludge is often very full of PFAS. P would have all those sources listed because we're only finding about those day by day. And not a week goes by tracking chemicals. Fortunately, we don't have that here, but that's just an example. But a couple of weeks before, there was a major national study that's been covered very widely, showing how many PFAS hydrology studies to see where they are moving, in plumes underneath, and how they're getting into different aquifers. How they're getting, since you could say, well, we don't have industries that are probably using it. We're also finding that it's a lot of use in all kind of petrochemical settings. So every kind of petrochemical could have a chemical fire, a petroleum-based fire. They have got to have these AFFF foams on hand. I think I started in my opening comments, we should be happy that we're doing better than other places. There are some places that have literally thousands and states than most states. Question about what technologies are the best. I see we are using GAC. A lot of the newer PFAS can break through the GAC filters. So it's important to actually study what comes through them and to look at them over time. And we see that those are designed for things that we know better, the older ones, PFOA and PFOS. And that's where most of the research has been, and that's where most of the remediation work has done. So not just MCLs, but also bills to restrict the use of firefighting foam. Our own state, the State House is looking at bills on tobacco. One of the places that really broke this nationally. Pesticides themselves had PFAS in them, as did the plastic containers, which they've done. So if the more we prevent these exposures, the less we're going to have in our water that we have to worry about removing. Before there were MCLs, hyannis is a good example, and air as well. Both of them, when we were in the earlier stage before state or PFAS, or the two of them combined, they took action to deal with that. And in some cases, that meant filtration, but it also meant mixing this approach. But I would say talking to people there who took a very precautionary, proactive, early decision, knowing that it would cost money for their communities, low-income people and a lot of people of color. And air is not a very wealthy community either, but people there took it very seriously. In the case of you may know that we do have a Massachusetts interagency task force that I actually testified at recently. That is this problem. So I think it's probably worthwhile going to that and also seeing all the rest of the work that they've done through the task force. So.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Any questions from my colleagues for Dr. Brown? Claire, I'm available for questions later on. That would be great. And if not, that's okay. And again, really appreciate you joining us. And
yes, I appreciate the fact that I live in a city where we're taking this very seriously.
Great. Thank you so much again. So, Mr. Clerk, is anyone signed up for public comment?
We have one person signed up for public comment.
Thank you. So if we can hear from them.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm not sure why my screen won't go on to turn on my video, but it's been really nice to hear everyone speak about this. Thanks. So actually, this is my very first city council meeting. I've never really involved in it. It has actually been top of mind for a long time. I agree with the owner of Broadsheet Coffee that every neighbor I have talks about the drinking water. It's just a very business and residents in this entire city. So kudos to the whole team that does that. I guess my biggest thing is when I saw that original mission statement, totally agree that some people may poo-poo the taste of water, but there's some very real concerns with that. I actually do think part of the mission of the water department should be to have really clean water. We literally go to Costco and Walmart every week, buy water, and lug it up several flights of stairs to actually meet our water needs. Surrounding communities, I mean, we didn't think it was actually a widespread issue until we started talking to other people about it. And it really does seem like it is. And I totally understand the North Star here. We should be considering our end users, which are residents and businesses, and the taste matters, right? I think it's really important to consider waters and, lug them up the stairs to make sure that we can drink this. But a lot of our city's residents are probably not so fortunate. So I think we really can do better. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. If any Okay, thanks. So if anyone else in the audience would have any questions or comments from my colleague, please raise your hand and I'll call on you to speak.
Focuses on the business owners' concerns, and I'm sorry. Would love to hear Mr. Corda's thoughts on that, on whether or not that's, I would assume industry would have similar concerns, and we've not heard any of that at any.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to briefly respond myself as well, having run a biotech lab in Cambridge for several years on Cambridge's water versus anybody else's water, because
Sure.
you can't use municipal water for biotech experiments. So I think that's a little different in terms of expectations from what coffee shops and other food providers might have. Mr. Corda or Mr. DePasquale?
Sam, you want to start? Then Arthur, I think you should also jump in on this.
All right, unmuting never seems to go that easy. Again, as I said before, obviously we have a certain water quality in Cambridge. I'm going to, the key is really understanding what the water quality is and then designing for that. Mixing valves, I've had direct experience with that. Have one that has the appropriate items, whether it's a cathodic and a sacrificial anode, or whatever it may be, or hot water heaters, 2 electric and 2 gas to have backups so that we can always have hot water. And they've all been replaced, but it was at about the 18 to 20 year time period. Again, I believe strongly that it's about the design. The coffee is a different issue in the sense that it's above 30 parts per million. Obviously it's a lot closer than ours, but again, you're going to run into a similar problem from a warranty perspective. The minerals in the water or the total dissolved solids can be a plus, and they can add a taste to the water. I've heard that complaint that one of the problems with the RO is that it takes them, and there is obviously a cost to that. But again, I think we have a certain water quality, and everything needs to be understood. And again, pay attention. The thing failed. There's got to be a problem with it. We should probably do something different here. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the water quality. I drink it every day, and I think it tastes fine. Again, that's my personal preference. And again, we all do have personal preferences as well.
And I understand tastes are different for every individual, but as someone who's lived in the city my entire life, most, if not all, of the people I deal with drink Cambridge. Point of view, that really hasn't been a factor in all my years with the city. And Arthur, I don't know if you want to get into anything about when questioned what impact our water have had.
I guess the issue is whether the city would be liable for any particular damage related to the general matter. The city would not be legally responsible for managing its water supply in circumstances where people have to maintain their lines that serve their property and take certain measures to maintain equipment they've purchased. But that is not something that the city is responsible to do.
Owen, anything you want to add? Okay.
Not at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sharing information for business owners, homeowners, is there, and outlines what Mr. Corda said, makes recommendations. That's all I'm getting at. We all have, but if you're not sure what the problem is, you do repeat it and you get even more frustrated. So my question was focusing on if you don't know about the coffee industry and I certainly, and they have their own system, and that was considered a highlight. So I just want to make sure this to say don't buy a certain level of equipment, buy one that will last like the water department's water heaters. That's all I'm getting at. It's not liability, whose fault it is, it's knowledge and sharing it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure that you were able to see it earlier, Mr. Corda, but that's the level of calcification that I had to deal with, and have to somehow anticipate that, and then we have to, spend extra dollars and extra time I myself can do that would avoid that level of calcification in that water heater mixing valve. So that's really the challenge for you. Don't account for the cost to us as property owners in terms of the work and the expenses that we have to do to manage the level of liability claims. But there's still this question of full cost accounting. Is it really cheaper if you have to that aren't fully accounted for when we say that it's cheaper for us to have MWRA water? So like the PFAS situation, we have to spend more money to pull those contaminants out of the water, where with MWRA, it's not even in the water to begin with. So I think that's a real challenge that we need to grapple with going forward as to does it continue to make sense to supply our drinking water this way if we have to constantly manage these water quality issues?
Past their expiration dates, people can be criticizing water for that. So, and again, I think this is a discussion where you're always going to find ways we can do things better, same for our residents and for the city of Cambridge.
Mr. O'Riordan, and then I'll hear from Mr. McDougall.
I think Sam alluded to resiliency and the fact that we have redundancy in our system. And as we begin to think about the future, a very important consideration as we think about those issues, recognizing that there are water quality issues at the moment for homeowners, recognizing that it is also for water from a public health perspective. The city's water quality is a fine water. And so I go back to that fundamental question. I'm just thinking about all of the challenges that we are going to face. And I cannot set aside the need for redundancy and the resilience that it provides to us as we look into the future. So they were the only comments that I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I agree with you that the redundancy is a benefit, as are the sort of upstream benefits of maintaining that watershed. I agree with all of them. And climate change may present us with more of those types of situations also, right? And so, I don't think of it as an either or. The high quality that MWA water can provide us in terms of drinking, but we don't drink most of the water that we produce, right? So I do want to recognize Mr. McDougall.
Oh, thanks. If I could go back to the point one of the councilors made about talk about these problems. This type of problem is obviously deep-seated. It's not easy to solve. I think we all recognize that. I think we all recognize that the water system to point out problems with it. So there isn't a lot of information available to business owners. We all, if you know somebody, you talk to them and kind of figured out what the issue was. And that was just, equipment manufacturers speaking to retailers, other shop owners speaking to other shop owners. Yeah. Workarounds would be helpful too. I mean, the reality is that despite what Mr. Cordes said about, MWA works with RO systems for their shops, normal filtration seems to do just fine for them. Straight RO systems, you have blend back systems where you're combining a portion of your RO with a portion of the straight water coming in from the water system. That's water, or a Cambridge business owner who's grappling with the water issues because of the high chloride count. RO, again, is not 100% of chloride, so blending back is not really going to be saving you a lot of money there. So, I mean, if somebody could tell me another way besides RO for addressing these issues, and we would all love the best of all worlds. We would love to have, dependable, affordable, high quality water, right? With the chloride, if we could get the chloride count down. So.
Thank you for that. Rainwater collection systems for residents, which they use in their gardens, which can help to reduce the demand for, and in some places in the world, it's actually required for people to collect rainwater as another way to, if we're creative, without having to think about it as all or nothing, that we should or should not have our own ways to to work around some of these issues that are being presented and to address the concern that Councilor Carlone raised, which is that people don't know that. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? All right. So,
Carlo.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern. Absent. Councilor Nolan. Absent. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
yes,
Motion passes, 3 in favor, 2 absent.
thanks everyone.